Hi, Jeremy Crow here. This is my very first ever live stream, so I thought I'd do an Ask Me Anything kind of video today. I see I've got somebody waiting here. If you've got any questions, just let her rip. I'm ready for discussion here. Oh, they're gone. So I'm here talking by myself. Oh, somebody came in now. So if you have any questions, let me know and I'll answer them here in this live stream. This is my very first live stream, so I thought I'd do an Ask Me Anything format for this one. But it won't be much of a live stream if I don't get any questions. So I suppose I should probably fill the air with something. So I posted this, I scheduled this for exactly 3:33 p.m. Eastern time. Now that's a number that's been coming up a lot for me lately. Actually, the last two nights, I woke up in the middle of the night and I looked at my phone and it said 3:33 a.m. And I thought that was really interesting that both nights I woke up at exactly 3:33 a.m. This is a Saturnian number in the Enochian system, which is, oh, I got a question here, but I might as well finish my thought here. In the Enochian system, which was from the entities that were being communicated with by Edward Kelly and John Dee, this number 333 represented the main devil of that system, of the Enochian system, and that devil is named Choronzon, which is it seems very obviously derived from Kronos, which is Saturn. And it's interesting that this number started popping up the first night that it happened was Saturday night. Technically Sunday morning, but magically it's still Saturday night, which Saturday is Saturn Day. So I see here Shadow Zone said that that number's been popping up a lot lately for them as well. My magical practice lately has been I focus a lot on recognizing the wheel of the year. So that's like the festivals of the quarters and the cross quarters. So this would be like Lammas Night and Samhain and things like that. I'm trying to establish a kind of a family tradition because I have a son and my wife is interested in the esoteric as well, and we practice that together as a family. And so that's one of the things that I've been trying to focus on, is building up this kind of family tradition where we celebrate the festivals together, and raising my son like that. And I have another kid on the way as well. But beyond that, I've been doing a lot of work with Saturn. So it's really interesting that I happened to wake up at 3:33 a.m. like the last couple nights, and I did a Saturnian working actually that same morning, the morning of the Saturday, which would still be technically the Friday night, I suppose you could say, magically, because the sun hadn't risen yet, but it was really close to rising. And that same night, before I had gone to sleep, actually I had gone to sleep and then woke up at 3:33, and it wasn't like I planned it and I didn't have my alarm set or anything like that, but that's just something that happened the last couple nights. So and if you noticed in my videos, my most recent, probably 5 or 6 videos, Enlil has come up quite a bit. And I consider him a very Saturnian figure. And I've been doing a lot of studying of various different mythologies surrounding that. And one of the things that I noticed that I didn't really realize before was that Enki, which is a figure that I find very profoundly, I have a very profound connection with Enki, and I never realized. I should have realized this, but there's a connection between Enki and Poseidon or Neptune, and I should have noticed this because the most iconic image of Enki is him sitting on a throne, and there are streams of water coming out of him, and there's fish in that water, and he lives in an underground cave, like a subterranean underwater cave. So he lives underwater, and the seas as well are part of his domain. So I should have made that connection before, but it just kind of snapped together how those epiphanies happen. I'm sure you've probably experienced them before where you're like, oh yeah, I've seen those bits lots of times, but for some reason they never came together until that one moment. You're like, ah. So that happened recently with that connection between Enki and Poseidon and Neptune for me recently. Mostly I'd been focusing on the connection between Enki and Prometheus and some of these other light bearer archetypes like the serpent in Eden. But that connection with Poseidon or Neptune, it never really clicked. And then I started thinking about how the Chaldean ladder of lights, and if they had known about Neptune, what we now call the planet Neptune, and the planet Uranus as well. Uranus is like Anu, which is the father of both Enki and Enlil. So it's almost like if you have this image, you have Saturn is the furthest out of the planets that were known to the ancients. And then beyond that is Uranus, which is Anu, the sky god. And then beyond that is Neptune. And so it's interesting because if you go further out, then you get Enki. And if you come back in to what I like to call the cube, you have Saturn or Enki. And so it's like Enki rules, Enlil, the Saturnian figure, the Saturnian sun, right? The Kabbalistic tree, right? So you have Saturn being Bina, the third sphere, and that's where the connection 333 also comes in for Saturn. So you have Enlil being that third one, and then you have everything below it being kind of like the universe, which I call the cube. And it's interesting because on Saturn, the top, I think it's the North Pole of the actual planet Saturn, there's a perfect hexagram. And a hexagram is like a two-dimensional representation of a cube. And so that's a very interesting connection right there. So I've been feeling recently that I care too much about things with little relevance in life. What do you know about the cremation of cares, and what is your opinion of it? Oh, that's interesting. So there's a ceremony in the Bohemian Grove, or the Bohemian Club, sometimes it's also called. Now this is a retreat. I can't remember what state it's in, but somewhere in the United States, where a lot of very powerful individuals meet up in the woods, and they do little theater productions. And the former Prime Minister of Canada, Stephen Harper, he was there, and I imagine he probably performed some kind of musical thing because he has a band. If you weren't aware, he has like this garage band or whatever you want to call it, just for fun. And so I bet you he probably, played some music at that event. But they have these different, they have even drag shows apparently, from the records that, or the accounts that have been made, but the central ritual of the Bohemian Club is called the cremation of care. And it's actually a mock human sacrifice where they take an effigy of a human and they name it Dull Care. That's the name of this effigy. And then they end up, I think they burn it. They sacrifice it in some form or another. And I'm just going to put that there so I don't get the people in the background as much. Yeah, so what they'll do is in front of this giant, I think it's 40-foot tall stone owl, they wear robes and they have this ceremony where they cremate. Yeah, I mean, so they burn it. They cremate this effigy, which they've named Dull Care. And there's different interpretations, but essentially it boils down to freeing yourself from the burden of very heavy choices that have to be made. But now you could totally adapt that for your own personal ritual if you wanted to. You could write a ritual where you create an effigy. Like you could make like essentially what you could think of like a voodoo doll in a sense. And you would baptize that doll with the name Dull Care if you wanted to kind of emulate this Bohemian Club ritual. And then you would infuse it with all of your anxieties and the stress that you feel from the various different decisions that you have to make in life. And then you infuse that magically with the figure, and then you would cremate it in a ceremonial fashion. So you'd probably want to do some sort of frame rite, like I mean the most common frame rite out there, just to give you an example of what I'm talking about, would be the Lesser Banishing Ritual of the Pentagram or the LBRP. But there are tons of different ones. I wrote one that I use a lot, and it's actually you build a cube rather than casting a circle, which most of them do. The one that I do most often is called the Hidden Cube of Gnosis, and it's one that I wrote myself. And you seal the 6 faces of the cube and the center, which you're in, with the 7 metals of the earth, which correlate to the planets, the 7 planets of classical astrology. And I use a unicursal hexagram for that, and then seal each of the 6 faces in the center with one of the 7 metals of the earth. And that's the opening rite of my Hidden Cube of Gnosis ritual. And then you would do the main work, and then instead of redoing that all, I just do kind of like a simple license to depart type closing, where it's like an announcement saying, return to your abodes and be friendly with me type thing. That sort of classic license to depart closing. So that would be one way that you could utilize that same formula that's utilized by some of the most powerful people on the planet at Bohemian Club or Bohemian Grove. Bohemian Grove is the location, and Bohemian Club is the name of the organization. That's my understanding of it anyways. Correct me if I'm wrong. But that's how you could utilize that same formula in order to unburden yourself from the stresses of having to make decisions, even if they may seem trivial to you. If they are burdening you, if you're finding yourself with decision overload or decision stress, then you could utilize that formula from that. So somebody said, what was their religion? I think we're talking about the Enki-Enlil connection. So Promethea, she said, what is their religion? I think you're referring to the Enki and Enlil. and their father Anu. This would be the names that are used in the Sumerian tradition. So the official religion of the Sumerian culture. And then that was inherited by the Babylonians, and the names would have changed. So instead of Enki, they said Ea, which is in English, in Roman characters, we spell it as EA. And Enlil, that would be El, which ended up being a god that the Canaanites inherited that god name, and that even got into the Bible. So the main god of the Old Testament is El, which is Enlil, which is that Saturn figure. But it's been kind of modified through the ages. As each culture inherited it, they also changed it somewhat as they went down. So what else do we have here? What are your thoughts on Pazuzu? I recently bought a statue of him. That's interesting. It's a very common one that you'll see a demon from the Mesopotamian culture, Pazuzu. It's not one that I've actually done a lot of work with, so I can't really give you much detail on that, other than that it's from the Mesopotamian culture. Let's see. Thank you for that information. I'm trying to sever the ties between choice and causality, because clearly there are none. Okay, you're welcome. Greetings from Mexico. Armando says, greetings from Mexico. I've translated some of your work into Spanish. Very cool. Why don't you send me a message after this through my Twitter is probably one of the best ways to reach me. Jeremy Crow, at Jeremy Crow, no E on the end of that. Yeah, Armando, send me a message on Twitter. If I'm not following you, send me a public one, then I'll follow you and you can send me a direct message. Shadow Zone Productions says, do you have any upcoming projects with Michael W. Ford? Oh, Armando, okay. I don't use Facebook anymore, so if you sent me a message on Facebook, then I won't get it. I just kind of cut that out probably at the beginning of the year. Upcoming projects with Michael W. Ford. Nothing specifically planned right now, although Michael Ford is definitely a friend, and we've done projects in the past together. But we don't have anything specifically planned right now. Promethea asks, who is real God? Well, the way that that's worded, it kind of implies that there's one God, that there's one real God. And I don't know if that's the case. I think that kind of the God of this world, some people say, is would be the Saturnian one, which would be Enlil. And you could go back to the oldest name that we have for him, which would be Enlil. And that's the God that is the demiurge, you could say, in Gnostic terms. The demiurge is the one that kind of created this, what I like to call cube, of course, is the world of existence that we're kind of trapped in, that we keep getting recycled back through. And so Enlil, you could say, would be the god of this, of incarnation and samsara, the god of the illusory simulation, the god of the collective fractal hologram. But there's more beyond that. There's something outside of the box. You can think outside the box, you can escape the cube. So there's more beyond that. Armando, Saturn as the ruler of the materia. Right. And I also believe that the cube is not just the physical part. The physical part is just the most dense part of the cube. But there are subtle realms that are still part of the cube, that I believe that you haven't escaped the cube when you're astral projecting. You're just in a less dense part, in a more subtle part of the cube. So I have enough time for another couple questions if anybody has anything else they want me to cover. Okay. Disco. asks, what advice would you give someone who has studied the occult for 2+ years but hasn't practiced any rituals yet? Practice some rituals. I know it's obvious, but jump into it. I mean, you've done enough studying to get enough theory behind you, but to really experience things, you actually have to start doing some practices. Now, there are other forms of occultism and esoteric practice that aren't ritualistic. One of my most favorite forms of esoteric practice is the lucid dreaming and astral projection. As I was just mentioning, that you can travel to less dense parts of the cube in the subtle realms if you learn how. And one of the easiest ways to get into that is through lucid dreaming practice, and it's one of the most powerful practices that I personally engage in. And that would be something that I would highly recommend. It's profoundly transformative, these experiences that you have in a lucid state. When you're in a lucid state, and that means that you're aware of the nature of the reality that you're being presented with. So if you're in a dream, you are essentially in your own miniature cube, or your own microcosmic cube, because each of us has a microcosmic cube, and there is the collective cube. So you can practice within your own microcosmic cube through lucid dreaming. And I have a whole bunch of videos. I actually have a playlist on my channel for lucid dreaming practice, and it goes through some of the theory and also some very practical advice on how to make lucid dreams happen more often. And you can start, if you practice this regularly, you can have lucid dreams fairly often. Some people have more of a natural, a knack. You could say a knack for lucid dreaming. And some people, they'll have a lucid dream pretty much every single night, but that's just very lucky if you do. Most people, they have to work at it, and they have to practice every single day to maintain that. Well, essentially what you're doing is you are ingraining a habit. You're creating habitual behavior, because when you're in a dream, you are acting habitually if it's non-lucid, which most of our dreams generally are non-lucid. We experience stimulus and we react to it habitually based off of the habits we've already built up. So in a dream, you think that what you're experiencing is waking reality or waking experience, but you don't realize that it's a dream. So you're just acting as if it were waking experience. You're not lucid. You're not engaging with it with the knowledge of what you're engaging with. But you gain a massive amount of power within the dream if you can realize the nature of the reality you're being presented with. So what you have to do is ingrain the habit of questioning whether or not you're actually experiencing a waking experience or a dreaming experience. And eventually you will question that while you're having a dreaming experience. You'll be like, is this a dream? And if you can sincerely test that, and there are some tests you can do, state tests you can do to make that determination, then oftentimes you'll still be deceived by that, and you'll say, oh no, this is real. And then you wake up and you realize it wasn't. But that's a good turning point, because that shows you just how convincing this dreaming experience can be in tricking you into thinking that it's a waking experience. So once you've had that once or twice where you're tricked into thinking that you've you've determined that it's a waking experience, then you can really sincerely be like, okay, well, I really might actually be dreaming. And so then when that happens in a dream again, you can be like, oh, I am in a dream. And if you can stay in the dream, and there are tricks and tips that you can use to make yourself not wake up prematurely and stay in that lucid state, then you can do all kinds of things that even just moments before would have seemed impossible. And so I feel like that is almost like a way you're kind of hacking the matrix of your own construct, you could say, if we're using the Matrix movie as an analogy. So you use your own microcosmic cube to practice all these different powers, and I feel like it translates into your ability to think laterally at the very least, but also you can work with the various different internal components of your own psyche in that environment, and you can do internal alchemy in that state in a very powerful way. So that is one thing you can do that doesn't require rituals at all, and that is, I think it's even more powerful than rituals. But definitely ritual is very effective, and it can help you program your reptile brain. So it can help you ingrain habits that you find useful. So, like, for example, questioning the nature of the state that you're experiencing. That's a habitual behavior that is very useful to ingrain. And you can use ritual to do that, to more powerfully ingrain that habit, or that predilection, or that habitual behavior, or programming, you could even call it. You can program yourself. Disco says, I've had 2 lucid dreams in my life, and one has already come to pass in real life with my friend being shot and killed. The other was an alien invasion I'm sure has yet to come. And Shadow Zone Productions, as well as Disco, are saying thank you for this, and yeah, thank you for the appreciation. I'm humbled by the comments that I receive on this channel. Yeah, I've actually experienced a lot of alien stuff in my lucid dreams. It's one of the dream signs that I've accumulated. So once you've had a lot of dreams that you've remembered, and if you can keep a dream journal, that is ideal. Write down even just point form, or even dictate into a voice recorder, like a voice recorder app on your smartphone even. But somehow record your dreams, even in point form, even in summary form, or draw pictures of things you encountered in your dream. Whatever your preferred modality is, you can record your dream in some way or another, and that sends a powerful message to your subconscious that remembering dreams is important. You'll remember way more. Hey, from the light of the darkness. Hella, hey Jeremy. Hell yeah, hey Jeremy. Yeah, that's JD. How's it going? Thanks for hopping on. So what was I talking? Oh yeah, the alien connection. So over having recorded a ton of dreams over the course of my life, I've noticed that a very, very common theme in my dreams is either aliens or some kind of weird thing in the sky, like multiple moons or multiple suns, or even planets that you can see, like Saturn with the rings, and we're back to Saturn, full circle here, full ring. Sometimes I'll look up in the sky and I'll see the planet Saturn with its rings around it, and it looks bigger than the moon. And things like that, even fireworks or shooting stars, or unidentified flying objects, or UAPs as they're now called, people are calling them now. These types of things I've come to recognize if I see something strange in the sky like that, I instantly question whether or not I'm having a waking experience or a dreaming experience. And that's been one of my most powerful dream signs, because I've had a lot of dreams with aliens and UFOs and things like that in them. So that's interesting that you mentioned that. Now, I don't feel like a lucid dream is necessarily precognitive, that you're not necessarily having a dream that's going to come true in the waking experience, but it's possible. So we'll do one more here. Jeremy, what we think of an alien just be egregore demons, gods, even angels? Yeah, that's absolutely possible. So it's an egregore, if you're not aware, is essentially a spirit that's been created through collective energy being given to it over a long period of time usually, but there are methods that you can utilize to make it happen more rapidly and powerfully. So there are often egregores at the head, like this, they become the spiritual head of an esoteric order. For example, you have one of the most classic examples would be the Brotherhood of Saturn. Their spiritual head of the order is a non-corporeal being, which is essentially an egregore that they refer to as Gotos. And that's an anagram for something. I'm not going to give away all the stuff here, but you can look that up and do some more research on it on your own. But yeah, that's an egregore, for example, that's been intentionally manufactured by a group of trained esotericists, a group of trained occultists. Now, these things also happen non-intentionally. So they build up through folklore, they build up through various different experiences that individuals have, and they gain more and more substance on the subtle realms. And now some people say that aliens could be a modern incarnation of some of these same egregores that were built up in ages past that we referred to as demons and angels. And that's absolutely a very possible thing. Now, most of the alien encounters happen in that bardo, or the in-between state between wakefulness and dreaming. And actually, it's not two separate states. If you're thinking of it as two separate states, waking experience and dreaming experience, it's not two separate states. It's actually a continuum. I've gone through that transition from more times it happens naturally, where you slowly transition from the dream state into a waking state, and the transition is so gradual that there's not one point where you're like, okay, now I'm awake and I was asleep and dreaming before. It's a gradual transition, and it transforms, whatever you were dreaming about transforms into whatever the data is coming in from your physical sense organs. So like I had one where I was seeing down a road, and it gradually transitioned into the lines where the ceiling and my wall met. And it was a very gradual transition. There was no point at which I could say conclusively, now I'm awake, or I was asleep in that moment before and now I'm awake. And that's happened to me several times. And sometimes you'll be in that bardo, I like to call it. That's a Tibetan word, just means in between state. That bardo between the waking experience and the dreaming experience. And that's where some real magic happens. And that is the state where most people have these alien encounters. And so I find it very interesting that that connection there. So absolutely, it could be egregores, or it could be something that predates humanity even, that egregores are being used as masks by this much older intelligence, you might say, or entity. So there's that. Now I don't really have much time left here for this live stream, and we've gone past 33 minutes and 30 seconds by a little bit, by a couple minutes. So I'm gonna hop off now, and I hope everybody enjoyed this live stream, and I'll do more of these since people here at least enjoyed it. And until next time, everybody, you know what I'm gonna say, stay lucid.